Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Fidelis Company SAP HANA Time webinar. Once Tommy and Sam wrap up, we will go into a live Q&A segment, so please have questions ready to send in. At this time, I'm going to hand things off to Tommy McMullen and Sam Schoelen.
Hello, this is Tommy McMullen from Fidelis Company. I'm the SAP Practice Lead. On the line with me, I have Sam Schoelen, Chief Information Officer at Continental Resources. This morning, we'll be discussing a little bit about SAP HANA. All right, Sam, let's pretend for a moment that I'm the CIO of a mid to large-sized corporation. Everyone's talking about this new SAP product, HANA. Here's a few questions that I have. What is it?
HANA has been a very confusing topic. It doesn't matter who you ask or what you ask. The end result is that it's a very fast database. It's hardware, they call it appliance, they call it software, they call it all of these magical things, but at the end of the day, it is a replacement for any database architecture that you have. You can use it to augment it, you can use it for a million things, but it is an extremely fast in-memory database.
Compared to what we've used in the past, why HANA?
Really, the end result, however they market it, is speed. When you look at a SAP landscape, or any landscape for that matter, the CPU, the memory, the system itself is not being hurt. What really slows you down is the database. You need a database that can perform and give you the results that you need.
Well, in terms of installation, how long does an installation of HANA typically take, and what common things do I need to take into account?
It actually is surprisingly simple. The system itself is just a standard box that comes from HP, Cisco, and many other vendors. You load on top of that a normal Linux operating system. It does come as an SAP version, but it is very much still a Linux operating system with the application on top of it, and it is just a database application that is loaded.
In terms of duration and how long it takes to implement, is it based on size of company, amount of data? What kind of metrics am I looking for in terms of how long it would take?
The actual system as a whole can get implemented in less than a day, only a matter of a few hours. What the real time is going to end up with the actual configuration and integration with your landscape. If you're running this into a new environment, you are literally up and running in less than a day. If you're trying to move to HANA from, let's say, Oracle or SQL or anything along those lines, it's just going to take as long as the consultants that are doing the integration can do it. You can actually do an export and import into HANA to go live with your ERP database in a matter of however long it takes just to export your data and import it. The system itself is live, running, stable, and ready for data very quickly.
Okay, and you mentioned expertise. What kind of expertise would I need to do a HANA installation? Can I do it internally if I have a savvy SAP staff, or would I need to bring people in from the outside?
If you have a staff that is very intelligent when it comes to database architecture and SAP basis, it can be done internally. A HANA appliance is nothing more than somebody that understands Linux and understands databases. Anybody that understands those two things will be able to implement this platform, and then somebody with basis experience to understand how to point to a new set of data. So the same thing exists in large corporations where you have your Oracle DBAs and your basis guys. Those two guys have different jobs and they work together. Same thing happens. You're really just moving your Oracle guy to become a HANA guy.
Just like every other CIO and director of IT on Earth, I don't have an unlimited budget, so please help me answer this scenario. I've just invested multiple millions of dollars to purchase SAP, including Bob J, and now I'm being asked 3 years later to spend more money. How can I justify this to my board of directors? What's the return on investment?
There is a million different use cases that SAP has developed with their marketing. What it really boils down to is each company is different. Everybody has their own pain points, but most of them come back to speed. Let's use some examples. Fraud prevention. Some people can run a nice fraud prevention package against a standard database for a day, a week, or a month, and you get trend analysis, and it comes back and it gives you this nice information. Well, you can't run that against, say, a year's data or 5 years data, depending on your data set. Now, if you can run this against a 10-year mark and do trend analysis, you may find more fraud. You may be able to mitigate that, and now you've saved the money that you've invested. You may be able to run your reports faster and be able to create decisions on the fly. All of these different factors really are independent, and it just depends on the needs of each individual company.
Okay. Further to that, I spend several millions of dollars every year in maintenance fees for SAP. Why is HANA not included in the normal upgrade path for SAP that would be covered by this fee?
Well, what's interesting is SAP has seen all these things, and they've been changing how they price and include their actual integrations and pricing structures around HANA. It used to be just a appliance you buy, you pay X amount of money per gigabyte of memory that's going to be licensed, and then you're paying a support. Now, new implementations are getting different pricing. They have runtime pricing. They have all of these different ways to get in the door. So it's hard to say even today what's going to be different tomorrow. But SAP will work with you because they want you in the door and they need you to be buying this application. They put all their bets on HANA, and they will do what they have to get you in a HANA appliance.
With that said, I guess, how is HANA licensed? How did you license it? How would most people see it licensed from SAP?
The typical licensing as it stands prior to all these changes was to just provide pricing based around the memory. So HANA Edge was priced in a 32 gig, a 64 gig, a 128 gig licensing scenario. But the HANA Enterprise obviously is more in the terabyte metrics. So you buy your license based strictly on the memory that resides in the system, or I should say the memory that you're allowed to use. You can have a server with 5 terabytes of memory in it, but only licensed for 32 gigs of HANA usage.
Okay. Continuing on with the topic of cost, what is the typical hardware cost to support HANA? And if you could help justify the cost of the actual hardware, that would be outstanding.
The hardware itself is going to depend on the manufacturer. The system is just like any normal server. I'm running an HP server that I can put anything on. I can put VMware on there. I can put Windows on there. It's strictly just a piece of hardware. It's just a server. The real cost comes from the memory. You have to load these boxes up with a ton of memory to get it to do what you need it to. So that's really where your cost comes in. But at the end of the day, it's just a server. A lot of people like to say that the hardware that this is running on is so ridiculously expensive. In actuality, it's not. The only thing that really tends to cost a little bit is the licensing, but it depends on how you license it. For instance, we're running HANA Edge, and the cost was not that extreme. The server itself was not that extreme. It's a lot of preconceived notions about this cost, because when HANA Enterprise was released, it was a very expensive product. HANA Edge is much more priced attractively, and you can get in the door with a tiered architecture and end up running it for a decent cost, not necessarily breaking the bank.
Okay. I've heard costs differ on compression versus utilization. Can you elaborate on that?
It really depends on your particular landscape. They throw around numbers left and right. A lot of it is not concrete. A lot of it is hypothetical. You really need to find a company that will do a proof of concept for you. They're out there. I have quite a few that I've dealt with. They'll take your data, they'll actually drop it into their HANA sandbox and show you what will happen. They'll show you your compression ratios, which some people talk about 3 to 1, and they'll show you how fast everything can run. So that's what I recommend, is you have to try it out. You can't just go on the assumptions of what everybody else is saying. I can tell you how my performance is. That's not necessarily going to show you what your performance is.
Okay. On to the topic of performance. Am I to believe all this marketing that I read from SAP? Is the performance truly like that? If you could describe a little bit of the performance, that would be great.
It really is. So what I can say is what my performance is going to be. Obviously, like I just mentioned, it depends on the scenario. So when I'm running my reports against my HANA appliance, I can get a dashboard to come up, load a full year's worth of data, do somewhere on the lines of 8 million complicated calculations in about 7 seconds, loading it from my ERP into HANA and presenting it. Now, generally speaking, we've seen numbers on that to be around a couple minutes. So a couple minutes down to 7 seconds. So if you look at larger equations and say people that run reports that take a week down to a day, and you go even larger than that, and some people run back-end processes that would take a couple weeks to run. These types of scenarios are real, and they do happen, and you can see that reduced timeline.
Okay, this all sounds fantastic. What are the big things that SAP does not tell you along the way? What are the gotchas?
The biggest gotcha as far as I can see. Now let me tell you that I was quite surprised that I did not hit any major roadblocks. As with any new technology, you expect to hit these roadblocks, and I didn't. It actually installed, it worked, it did what they advertised, there was no issues. The biggest thing that I look at, two different things actually, is going to be how quickly things are changing. It's difficult when this new technology is out there, and when you buy it today, tomorrow they may change the licensing architecture to be either cheaper or more expensive, and then you've either missed out or you've done good by getting in the day before. I recommend talking to some people that are near and dear to the product line to find out what's the forecast, where are they going with this, should I wait till next month before moving forward. An example of that would be the HANA Edge appliance is in the process of getting certified for a 256 gig version. It's not there today. Right now, HANA Edge, I believe, maxes out at 128. So had I known that I could wait a month and get in the door for that licensing mechanism, I probably would have. But once again, you have to just be near and dear to that as well as I am. I can see this forecast and know where it's going and make my decisions based off of that. Number two is they haven't really started talking about the redundancy and disaster recovery options of HANA. So they're out there, but they're not really embracing them. It's not solid yet. So those questions are very important. There are ways around it. I'm not saying you shouldn't make that move because of it, but you just have to know and understand that it's not, while we'll say it's a mature product, it isn't. It is new. It does great things, but you have to be ready to understand the implications.
Sounds a little bit like the stock market as it pertains to when you actually jump in.
That is very correct.
Excellent. Any other lessons learned for those of us about to jump off the SAP HANA bridge? Anything you want to leave us with?
It does what they say it does.
Thank you, Sam. At this time, we're going to open it up to our live Q&A segment, so please send in your HANA questions, and Sam will answer them the best that he can.
Maintenance fees, are they worth it in your opinion?
When they first released the maintenance fees and what you'd end up paying for it, I would say it probably wasn't. But now they're starting to change that, in which I think it was around, I want to say 14% is what they were saying. But if you look at your Oracle maintenance fees being 11% and now it's being 14%, it's not that big of a difference. It's there, but you're going to see a lot more for it. So I would say in that scenario, it is worth it.
Okay. Does HANA cluster run in an active mode?
That's a very good question, and there's still a lot to be discovered about fault tolerance, disaster recovery, and failover. I don't believe that portion of the product is mature enough to even have intelligent conversations about. Even with the SAP engineers that I've talked with, they don't even know exactly how it operates. So that's my big question about everything as far as the failover and fault tolerance. And that's one of the things that really needs to be dug deeper on before moving your full ERP over to the HANA landscape.
Okay, and we have a wide variety of folks listening to this webinar. This one obviously comes from the independent consulting market. How important is HANA certification as opposed to hands-on live environment experience?
Personally, if I'm out there looking for a consultant to do this, I would much prefer somebody that says to me, I've done this before, than I have a sheet of paper that says I can do it. Now, that's an interesting topic because I've actually been out there talking to a lot of people, and I've been very much involved in this topic since day one. And a lot of people will say to you, I'm certified in this. And then you ask them the question of, tell me how many times you've done it. And you hear a very dead silence. And whether it be an independent consultant or a company or anybody, it's very rare you'll find somebody that's actually done it, but that's what you're always going to be looking for.
Okay. Can you give me some insight to the sizing of HANA memory in terms of source data size? Additionally, are there additional memory considerations for the routine runtime of analytics? Example, does there need to be a consideration for RAM usage during the reporting analysis in addition to the source data size?
Yes and no. So what they're saying as a generic number is you'll have about 1/3 of your data size. So if you have a 300 gig data source, it'll use about 100 gigs of memory. But like I had said before, it just depends on your actual real data. That's just a generic number they're throwing around. Now, I definitely would size the system to be bigger than, say, the exact 100 gigs because you still have an operating system and you still have other components that need to use memory. It doesn't need that much more, but it still needs some memory to operate out of as well. So I wouldn't buy it specific for the exact amount of memory that you think you'll consume, and that's just a general rule of thumb with any sizing of any types of systems.
Okay. Does this replace the need for BW and just use BI tools like BobJ on top of ECC?
It does, in my personal opinion, but it depends on what you're actually trying to do. They actually have a HANA implementation for just BW, but at the end of the day, all you really need is HANA. You don't need BW. So if you don't have BW, you can implement HANA and be without it. If you have it and you want to keep it, you can actually run BW on top of HANA. It depends on how you developed your architecture. Some people develop specifically for BW, and therefore they would want to maintain that. They just want to get the speed from it. But you really don't need BW. You look at the real reasons why that has been created. HANA eliminates that. You no longer have a need to export your data and put it in a place to be analyzed because you can do that with all of your live data because you have enough computing and speed and storage to do it all in one place now. So you get that instant real-time data and you can manipulate it in any way you'd like.
Okay, can you pilot it with a subset of data?
Yes, you can, depending on who you're working with. There's a few different consulting firms that I know are out there that will take either your entire set of data or a subset of data, and they will do a full pilot program for you and show you the results and what you'd actually be looking for. For instance, and also I can say with my particular implementation is I'm not using my full set of data either. It is only certain financials that I'm pulling in there right now and certain sales. So I know I'm personally not using my full set of data, but I will be moving forward.
Okay. Somebody heard you mention that there's a basis, a DB admin, a developer, with no mention as to who does security for HANA?
Well, security for HANA, I think it's one of those things that gets developed as with any maturing product. A lot of products come out day one, and you have somebody that is just an administrator. And then as a product gets more mature, then you realize there's security holes and there's things that need to be addressed, just as with anything along the lines of database security. It's very interesting. If you look at even the interface of HANA, it looks just like an Oracle or SQL interface. So it follows all the same rules. The same types of vulnerabilities are going to be there, the same types of issues, just with different flavors. It's just like comparing DB2, Oracle, and SQL. There's differences, also similarities. So if you do have a strong need for security, then I think you will need a person to identify those holes and work with them, but you're not going to find them out of the gate because there's nobody out there poking for those holes yet, but they will come.
Are they going to extend HANA to any other modules?
They are actively doing that, and if you look at how they're actually taking this product and what they're forecasting its uses for, they have a nice path of releases for HANA. For instance, when I moved on my HANA implementation, they had just released it for the business objects and literally released it the day that I moved on the product. And then they released it for ERP, and then they released it, well actually I think Business Warehouse was released before that, before the ERP, but they are constantly releasing it for new products and creating more use cases for it. So I would always keep my eye to the news and see what they're releasing it for and then what they plan to release on it next.
Do you know when HANA will be ready for VMware?
I do not know. I do know that there's a lot of people out there, some of which I'm specifically working with, that are working with cloud HANA implementations in which you can actually use shared infrastructure and shared HANA resources for your data. I don't know how they particularly sell it, but I know what we do to work with them for it. So they are experimenting with all of these things today in which you can use a pseudo-virtualized environment to get the results of HANA out of it.
Okay. And just so you guys know, we're going to ask questions for another about 5 minutes, so I'll try to get to everyone's questions. Is it better to run HANA in native mode or virtual mode? Has anyone been successful with virtualization with HANA?
Well, I shouldn't say anybody been successful. I should say not that I know of, but there are people out there that are doing it. I don't know how successful they've been doing it, just knowing that they exist.
What are you seeing in the market in terms of business object tools that can exploit the capabilities of HANA?
I think that is one of the most developed uses of HANA. They have had that in existence probably the longest, so there's a lot more people out there that are using that. I know one of my consultants that is a very, very experienced business objects consultant who's been in that field before SAP owned them, was looking at the dashboard and saw it run for the first time. The first thing he had to say was, I've never seen a dashboard run at these speeds. It very much takes advantage of HANA, and I think that's where you really see a lot of results.
Okay. How stable has HANA been for you?
Surprisingly, extremely stable. One thing I always expect is new products to have stability issues. That's one of the reasons you don't use bleeding-edge products. You expect them to fail. It's just a natural progression until they become a very stable product. But this product has now been up and running, I want to say, since early this year without any problems. There was one checkbox that needed to be checked about purging data, and then after that, not one other issue, and it's been a very great experience knowing that.
Okay, another performance question. Does HANA improve performance across the board, or is it more effective in certain functional areas?
I would say it's across the board because it's still feeding that data and compiling that data at speeds that a hard drive can't do. So no matter what you're looking at, it's going to be faster. Certain things are going to be proportionally faster, of course, but across the board you should see performance increases.
Okay, if you're running BW now and it's already invested millions in that, how much trouble is it to work BW on HANA?
Well, that's why I believe they came up with their HANA BW product, probably because of that specific scenario in which, now I don't have my personal experience in that, but they say it's the same as what we're doing today, is you take an existing product and you drop it on top of HANA, you get the speeds and feeds, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So that's why that product exists.
Okay. If BPC is implemented in BW, does HANA replace that?
I don't believe it's exact one-to-one replacement, but it can offset a lot of those needs.
As in today's world of SOX and segregation of duty, as of for the rest of SAP having strong security in place, wouldn't HANA security be a good add-on experience for a security consultant?
I definitely believe that to be true. Unfortunately today, as I stated earlier, security is not as much developed for new products as they are for existing products. So as you look at a product that's new to the market, you'll see the security of that product be developed, usually at a later date. But I do agree that your security is very integral data to the company. Therefore, it does need to be considered, and it does need to be developed as time goes on.
Why do we have to go with 7.31 BI when we have HANA?
Well, the level of BI versus what HANA is going to establish, as with other applications, same with ERP, is there's certain hooks that are developed to get that speed. It's not just purely a fast database. So if you, as I said before, it is a fast database, but it's been developed to work with certain applications to be even better. So if you dropped a Microsoft SQL database on top of it, I'm sure it would be much faster. But the fact that applications such as business objects and ERP have been developed for it would make it even better, and that's why the version is very specific.
Is HANA better versus Exadata in terms of power consumption?
Well, that's an interesting topic. We actually have an Exadata in-house, and we've been looking at these solutions as well. So having one sitting right next to HANA is very interesting. So you can look at an Exadata, which is a very, very large device. It's built for very enterprise customers, and it does consume a decent amount of power. Again, the question is very specific power. It is built to be energy efficient, but an Exadata is an entire system that is very large and power hungry versus a HANA system, which is realistically just a very powerful server. So yes, it does consume much less energy. It is a much smaller form factor, but it depends on what size you order. You could buy a HANA appliance to be very small, being only 3U, whereas you cannot get an Exadata in that type of form factor.
What has been the feedback or stability with customers who are using HANA with SLT?
So that is actually how we are using our HANA appliance, and stability is very good. The one issue that I ran into is being SLT being real time versus the periods in which it's pulling the data. The real time actually did consume a lot more CPU cycles from my SAP ERP system than I'd like. So I changed that very easily down to a replication time of 30 minutes, and everybody's happy. So the SLT itself was very stable, but being the real-time component of the SLT was not very conducive to the CPU cycles of my ERP platform.
Okay, one final question. How long will it take before I see ROI?
Now, I answered that one during the actual webinar, and we spoke to that a bit, saying that it's very difficult to measure because everybody's ROI is going to be measured differently on the particular use case that you're actually looking for. So if you're looking for a use case of ERP, it depends what you're doing with it to see how long before you're going to see that return. So some people can see it the same day that they go live with it. Some people would take a month or two before they would actually get ROI.
I think that's all for questions now, so I'm going to turn it over to Kathy.
Thank you, Tommy and Sam, and thank you all of us for joining us today to talk about SAP HANA. We are also going to be posting this webinar on YouTube. It will be up by tomorrow, and that link will also be sent to you in your follow-up email. Thanks again. Have a